She laughed loudly at the party and said to everyone, "Let him pay the mortgage alone. He was always just my sponsor." Everyone around looked at me, expecting that I would lower my head in shame. But the next morning, I met her at the door with suitcases and signed papers in my hands. She left me with the mortgage. I left her with nothing. Subscribe, like, and leave a comment if you want more stories like this. It was an ordinary Saturday evening dinner gathering at our friends James and Karen's house. Their home was always lively. String lights softly hung from the terrace. The smell of fresh pizza and wine filled the air. Someone strummed a guitar in the corner of the living room. It felt like the whole world had gathered here to laugh, drink, and forget their troubles. I sat in an armchair with a glass in hand, trying to keep my face calm, though inside me everything was boiling. Laura and I had lived together for 10 years, and during that time I had grown used to her mood swings. But that evening was different. She radiated a kind of malicious satisfaction. I watched as she told story after story, drawing all eyes toward her. Every time she paused, the laughter was louder than the moment called for. Laura knew how to hold a crowd, and she always prided herself on it. I pretended to listen, but in reality, I was counting heartbeats. When you sit in a room full of familiar faces and realize the laughter is actually aimed at you, every breath feels heavier than the last. It all started with her toast. She lifted her glass, looked at me with a smirk and said, "Well, let's drink to freedom. I'm finally leaving for someone who knows how to live easily. And him," she pointed her finger at me, "he can keep the mortgage. That's what he was always for anyway." The room exploded with laughter. Some tried to hide their discomfort, some simply looked down. But there were also those who clearly enjoyed the spectacle of open humiliation. I noticed Jessica, the neighbor from down the street, rolling her eyes as if she herself was pained to hear it. I sat still. No words, no gestures. Laura kept laughing with the group, while I took another slow sip of wine. Inside, a storm was raging. A mix of hurt, anger, and cold determination. But outwardly, I was calm as stone. In moments like that, people expect shouting, arguments, a scene. But I denied them the performance. I looked at Laura as if I was seeing her for the very first time, and I felt the last thread holding our marriage snap. When the evening finally wound down, she made a point of announcing loudly that she would be picking up her things the next day. "Well, Tom," she said, "don't get too lonely. I hope your house papers are in order, because now it's all your problem." I only nodded. Her laughter echoed long after we left our friend's home. She probably thought I was sitting with the taste of defeat. But I already knew. My silence would speak louder than anything else. The night after the party, I barely slept. I lay on the couch staring at the ceiling, the faint glow of the street lamp cutting through the blinds, painting pale lines across the room. The echo of Laura's laughter still rang in my head, not because I cared about her words anymore, but because of the way everyone else had looked at me when she spoke. Pity, amusement, that sting of being reduced to a joke in the eyes of people you had once called friends. But instead of breaking me, that humiliation hardened into something else. I knew I would never again allow her or anyone else to think I was weak. Around 3 in the morning, I stood up, poured myself a glass of water, and stared at the stack of unopened mail on the counter. Bills, mortgage notices, a reminder of the chains she thought she was leaving me in. I smiled for the first time that night because in that moment, I realized those chains didn't hold me. They held her. She believed she had trapped me. But the truth was that I had something she had never even considered: the ability to act quickly and quietly. She loved to perform, to humiliate, to play to an audience. I had no need for an audience. My revenge would be silent, calculated, and devastating. By sunrise, I was already dressed, drinking coffee as the world outside began to wake up. The house was quiet except for the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. I looked around at the furniture, the photographs, the little pieces of a life that had once meant something. Now it was nothing but a stage where she had mocked me. I made a phone call to a realtor I had worked with years before, a man named Patrick. He picked up on the second ring, his voice groggy but alert when I told him who it was. "Patrick," I said, I need to sell fast. Today, if possible. There was silence for a moment, then a short laugh. You're serious? He asked. Dead serious. His tone changed immediately. Give me an hour. I'll be there. True to his word, Patrick arrived before 8. He walked through the house, taking notes, snapping quick pictures, asking a few questions. If you're willing to let it go slightly under market, he said, I can have this wrapped up before lunch. I've got a buyer who's been waiting for something in this neighborhood. I didn't even blink. Do it, I told him. He looked at me carefully, probably wondering why I was in such a rush, but he didn't ask. That was why I trusted him. By 10, the papers were on the table. By 11, they were signed. And by noon, the money had already been wired to my account. Just like that, the house that Laura had mocked me over was no longer mine to worry about. The so-called burden she had so proudly declared she was leaving behind didn't exist anymore. I had turned it into freedom. I spent the rest of the afternoon quietly going through my belongings. I packed only what I needed: clothes, a few books, some personal documents, and my father's old watch. The rest I didn't care about. As I placed the watch carefully into a small bag, I felt a strange calmness settle over me. There was no anger left, no despair, only a clarity that I hadn't felt in years. I thought about Laura, probably still laughing somewhere, telling her lover about how she had left me stuck with the mortgage. I almost wished I could see her face when she realized just how wrong she was. Almost. But the truth was, I didn't need to be there to witness her downfall. She had built her entire world on control, manipulation, and appearances. Taking that from her would be more painful than any shouted argument or bitter fight. Late in the evening, I stood in the doorway of what used to be our bedroom. The bed was still unmade from the morning, her perfume faint in the air, her clothes draped over a chair. For a moment, a memory hit me. Us, laughing here years ago, when everything felt new and unbroken. But the memory was gone as quickly as it came. The woman I had married no longer existed, if she ever truly had. In her place was someone who saw me only as a paycheck, a sponsor, a safety net. She had underestimated me. She thought I would cling to her, beg, or crumble. Instead, I had already erased her victory before she could even collect it. The weight I had carried for years lifted, replaced by something sharper: resolve. When the clock struck midnight, I sat alone at the kitchen table, sipping the last of the coffee from the morning. The papers from the sale were neatly stacked in front of me, a symbol of the choice I had made. Outside, the world was silent. Inside, I felt a steady calm in my chest. Tomorrow would come, and with it, her arrival to gather her things. She would expect tears, anger, or desperate pleading. What she would find instead was something she could never control. I let the silence of the house wash over me, and for the first time in years, I felt entirely free. Morning light spilled through the curtains, bright and sharp, cutting across the living room where I sat waiting. The documents from the house sale lay in a neat folder on the table, my bags packed and resting by the door. I had been awake for hours, not from nerves, but from anticipation. The quiet of the house was different now. It no longer felt suffocating. It felt like a stage set for a final act. Around 9, I heard the sound of tires on the driveway, followed by the slam of a car door. Her voice carried even before she stepped inside, loud and confident, as if she were already playing to another audience. Tom, I'm here to get my things. Don't start moping, it won't make me stay, she called out, her heels clicking across the tile as she made her way into the house. I didn't answer. I simply sat, hands folded, watching the doorway. When she finally appeared in the living room, dragging one of her oversized handbags, she looked at me with that same smug smile she had worn at the party. Oh, you're actually up early. Guess you couldn't sleep knowing you'll be drowning in bills without me. She laughed as she tossed the bag onto the couch. Well, don't say I didn't warn you. You always loved playing the responsible one. Now it's all yours. She pulled out her phone, tapping on the screen, clearly ready to send a triumphant text to her new lover about how pathetic she thought I looked. But then she noticed the folder on the table. Her smile faltered just slightly. "What's this?" she asked, stepping closer. I didn't move. "Papers," I said evenly. "You should take a look." She reached down, flipped open the folder, and began to skim the first page. For a few seconds, her expression didn't change. Then the color drained from her face as the words registered. She read the date, the signatures, the final confirmation. Her head snapped up. You sold the house?" she stammered. Her voice had lost that playful edge, replaced by disbelief. "This is a joke, right?" I shook my head slowly. "It's done. The money is in my account. The house isn't ours anymore. We're yours. You don't have a stage to laugh on anymore." Her eyes widened, then narrowed in fury. "You can't do that without me. This is my house too." Her voice rose into a shriek, echoing off the walls. She grabbed the folder again, flipping through the pages as if she could find some mistake that would undo what had already been done. "You're lying. You're bluffing." I leaned back in the chair, calm as stone. "I'm not bluffing. You thought you left me with a burden, but you don't have the power to trap me. Not anymore." She dropped the papers onto the table, her hands trembling. For the first time in years, I saw something on her face that I had never seen directed at me. Fear. She paced the room, muttering under her breath, her arrogance crumbling with every step. "This isn't fair. You're supposed to keep the mortgage. You're supposed to struggle. That's what you deserve after everything I put up with." Her words tumbled out, but they were hollow, desperate. I stood up, slowly, letting the weight of silence press down between us. She stopped pacing and turned to face me, her eyes blazing with a mix of rage and panic. "Where am I supposed to go now? You think you can just throw me out like trash?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "You threw yourself out when you laughed at me in front of everyone. You wanted me to suffer. Instead, you get nothing." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the faint tick of the clock on the wall. She looked around the room at the furniture, the photos, the little tokens of a life she no longer had any claim to. Her breathing grew shallow, uneven. Finally, she grabbed her bag and stormed toward the door. "You'll regret this, Tom. You'll regret it when you realize you have nothing left either." I followed her with my eyes but said nothing. At the doorway, she spun around, expecting me to crumble, to beg her to stay. But all she saw was me standing calm, steady, untouchable. She slammed the door so hard the windows rattled, and the sound of her car peeling out of the driveway faded into the distance. I stood there for a long time, staring at the closed door. The house was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet. It wasn't the silence of emptiness. It was the silence of freedom. I walked back to the table, picked up the folder, and slid it into my bag. The house no longer mattered, and neither did her absence. What mattered was that I had taken back control of my life. I had cut the last string she thought bound me, and in doing so, I had left her with nothing. I sat down in the empty living room, sunlight warming my face, and for the first time in a long time, I smiled. After she left, the silence in the house lingered like a presence, thick and undeniable. I didn't move for a long while, letting it settle over me. It wasn't the silence of defeat anymore. It was a silence filled with power, the kind that grows after a storm has passed and left the world washed clean. I poured myself a glass of water and sat by the window, looking out at the yard I would never have to mow again, at the driveway that no longer tied me to a life of resentment. For years I had thought of this house as a symbol of stability, of marriage, of the life Laura and I were supposed to build together. Now it was nothing more than a transaction completed, a burden lifted, a door closed. The money was already secure in my account, a reminder that sometimes walking away doesn't mean losing. It means finally winning. By the afternoon, I began to notice the weight that had been pressing on me for so long was gone. I didn't feel the dread of bills waiting to be paid or the suffocating thought of years chained to a mortgage with someone who despised me. I didn't feel the ache of betrayal anymore either. It was as if Laura's laughter at that party had been the last weapon she had, and I had stripped it from her with one quiet move. The house was gone, and with it, every string she thought she still controlled. I imagined her sitting somewhere, trying to explain to her lover how the plan had backfired, how she had miscalculated. The same woman who had announced to a room full of people that I was just her sponsor now had nothing left to sponsor her life. The thought didn't bring me joy so much as peace. Her downfall was no longer my concern. It was simply inevitable. That evening, I packed the last of my things into the car. Clothes, documents, the watch my father had left me. Nothing more. The rest of the furniture and belongings would belong to the new owners now, a clean slate for someone else to build a life in. I took one final walk through the rooms, not with sadness, but with a strange sense of gratitude. This house had shown me the truth about the woman I had married, had forced me to confront the reality I had been too blind to see. Without these walls echoing her scorn, I might have stayed in the trap longer. Now, as I closed the front door behind me, I knew I was stepping out not just of a house, but of a past that no longer held me. I drove aimlessly for a while, windows down, the cool air rushing in. Every mile put more distance between me and the wreckage of the marriage I had endured. I stopped at a small diner off the highway, the kind of place where nobody knows your name and the coffee is always hot. I sat at the counter, ordered a slice of pie, and listened to the hum of conversation around me. Strangers laughed, argued, told stories of their own lives. It struck me how small my problems seemed in comparison to the vastness of the world. Laura's betrayal, her mockery, her smug toast. They were already fading into the background noise of memory. I wasn't the man she had tried to humiliate anymore. I was the man who had walked away before the trap could close, the man who had turned the tables without raising his voice. As night fell, I pulled into a motel and checked in under my own name, no longer needing to answer to anyone. I lay on the bed, the sound of traffic outside lulling me into a kind of meditative calm. For the first time in years, I felt like the master of my own story. There was no mortgage chaining me down, no scornful laughter echoing in my ears, no constant fear of the next cruel word or gesture. Laura had thought she left me with nothing but debt. In reality, I had left her with nothing but the emptiness she carried inside herself. The irony of it was perfect, but I didn't dwell on it. What mattered was the lesson I had learned. Silence can be sharper than words, and calm action can speak louder than any outburst. In the days that followed, I didn't hear from her. No calls, no messages, nothing. I assumed she was too busy trying to salvage her pride, too furious to admit to anyone how quickly her plan had crumbled. And that suited me just fine. The fewer reminders of her, the better. I began to think about where to go next, what kind of life I wanted to build without the weight of her shadow over me. For the first time in a decade, the future didn't look like a prison sentence. It looked wide open, like a road stretching into the horizon. One evening, as I sat alone watching the sun sink low over a quiet parking lot, I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I was free. Laura had tried to break me, to turn me into the butt of a cruel joke. But in the end, she had only revealed her own emptiness. And me? I had learned that sometimes the most powerful response isn't a scream, or a fight, or even a clever comeback. It's silence. It's patience. It's waiting for the right moment to move, and then moving so decisively that nothing can stop you. That was the real revenge. Not destroying her, but saving myself. And in that moment, as the last light faded, I knew this truth. Sometimes silence is louder than any roar, and walking away is stronger than holding on. Subscribe, like, and leave a comment if you want more stories like this.